Hello, I'm Joey Calla.
And I'm Will Turner.
And today we are going to be talking to you about the Civilian Conservation Corps. During the early 1900s, a great financial crisis hit the U.S., causing the biggest recession in the stock market's history. The crash caused the Great Depression, a time in the U.S. where unemployment rates soared and food was hard to come by for many people. Times were bad, and people in America needed help from a new president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected for president in 1932 and took office March 4th, 1933. Roosevelt's plan was to do as much as possible in his first 100 days in office. What happened during those days changed the situation the country was in. His idea was called the New Deal. It promised relief, recovery, and reform for the people. Many programs were created to address the issues caused by the Great Depression. The Civilian Conservation Corps was one of these such programs, which was created to provide relief by giving jobs and money to starving people of America.
The Civilian Conservation Corps, dubbed by the PBS as one of the most successful programs, was proposed by FDR on March 21st. Executive Order number 6101 was signed on April 5th, taking its first recruits on April 7th. The CCC's first camp was set up on April 17th, and by July, 275,000 boys between the ages of 18 and 25 were at work across 1,300 camps throughout the country, many of whom had been roaming throughout the country desperately looking for jobs. More than 3 million people were enrolled between 1933 and 1942, including jobless World War I vets and Indians on reserved land. The first director of the CCC was Robert Fechner, serving until his death 6 years later in 1939. James J. McGinty was the second director and led until 1942 when the CCC ended. The CCC was never formally canceled, but its funding was cut on June 30th in 1942 and set aside the rest of its money for liquidation. In 9 years, $3 billion were invested in the people and nature of America. FDR once said, "We are giving opportunity of employment to 250,000 of the unemployed, especially the young men who have dependents to go into the forestry and flood prevention work. This is a big task because it means feeding, clothing, and caring for nearly twice as many men as we have in the regular army itself. In creating the Civilian Conservation Corps, we are killing two birds with one stone. We are clearly enhancing the value of our natural resources, and second, we are relieving an appreciable amount of actual distress."
I wondered does my baby do the Charleston, Charleston. I wondered who is teaching her the Charleston, Charleston.
What did the CCC actually do for the people of America? The aim was to put young unemployed men to work on much-needed conservation programs. It provided its workers with $30 per month, with $22 to $25 going home to take care of their families. On each job site for the various projects, 40 to 50 men were given housing in the barracks, several in each camp. Each man worked from 7 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the afternoon. Each of the workers stayed with the CCC for about 9 months. On average, the boys were 18 and a half years of age, and they usually had an education equivalent to that of an 8th grader. About 60% of them were from farms or small towns. The CCC provided better conditions than some people's homes. It provided food, clothes, and financially supported families across the country. The CCC workers preserved and improved many of U.S. resources. Over 300,000 check dams were created, 65,000 miles of terracing to control erosion were put down, and over 3 billion trees were planted. Over 3,100 watchtowers were erected, 65,000 miles of telephone wire was laid, and 4 million man-hours were spent fighting forest fires. That's just scratching the surface of what they did. There was a poem written about their forestry jobs, and it goes as the following. All the boys went to work. In spruce and white pine of New England and New York, and the pine barrens of New Jersey, and the hemlocks of Pennsylvania, and the hardwood coast of Virginia and Carolina, and the longleaf pines of Alabama, and the yellow pines of Arizona, the hickories and oaks of Illinois and Ohio, and the red and jack pines of the Lake States, the lodgepole pines of Montana, and the high mountain forests of Colorado and Wyoming, and the open pinyons of Nevada, the redwoods of California, the Douglas firs of Washington, all working to protect, to improve these forests, to plant new forests, to make green again the cut off and burned hillsides of gutted America.
Other things that they did were plant, pest, and disease control, construction and maintenance of paths, trails, and fire lanes in national parks and forests. They worked in parts, did nature cleanups, did erosion control for 20 million acres of land, restoration of 4,000 historic structures, and building 1,500 cabins. They also laid 5,000 miles of water line, created 4,600 fish rearing ponds, improving 3,400 beaches, creating campgrounds, parks, and museums, fighting floods and mosquito swarms, and helping establish 800 state parks. There were problems with the program, however. 10% of the workers returned home prematurely or without permission because they felt homesick. There were also issues involving corruption, mismanagement, and harsh rules for the workers. The 200,000 black workers were harshly discriminated against, and most were placed inside separate camps. Despite these problems, the CCC was still an obvious good thing. $600 million in wages were sent to needy families. It was also a great place for men to learn how to work and other important skills. According to the National Park Service, the CCC advanced natural resource conservation in this country by decades.
The CCC restored tons of forests, established recreational reservations, and provided work for tens of thousands of young men from Tennessee. In total, around 75,000 Tennesseans were hired by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC was a huge help in establishing a state park system for Tennessee. Without the CCC, there may not be any state parks in Tennessee. The program's presence helped to make a base for Tennessee that it would need for its loads of future visitors. There were environmental and economic problems in the 20s in Tennessee, and the main public was very aware of that. The CCC helped to get Tennessee and the whole U.S. out of the economic hellhole it had dug itself. There were 76,600 enrolled in Tennessee, with 72,600 of them being Tennessee residents. There were two main work camps in Tennessee, Camp Sam Houston in Pikeville and Camp Wiley Post in Vonore. Tennesseans were taught basic arithmetic, writing, and civics instruction and how to succeed in the workplace. The CCC provided much for the country, but these are just some of the things that the CCC did for Tennessee and America.
I think that historian Richard Kirkendall sums up the CCC pretty well by saying that the program did more than simply provide jobs. It also took young people who would have otherwise been standing around on street corners and maybe thinking bad thoughts. You know, governments can be overturned. Roosevelt was well aware of that. And he thought that in terms of programs like that as a way of stabilizing things as well as promoting recovery. Thanks for watching!
Is it over yet?